Planning to join the army? Neither am I. I've been seeing growing polarized viewpoints about fighting in the army and the purpose of the military altogether. Some say,
what does it mean to serve? Well, that's a lot of things. To me, serving means making a difference not only in my community, but as well as my nation.
While the others say,
Я уже ничего не боюсь. Самое ценное, что они могут от нас отнять, это жизнь детей. Я жизнь ребенка своего не отдам.
So it had me thinking, militaries in the past have had men fighting for their kings to protect the kingdom and also help him win some extra land to give him some ego boost. But when did people begin fighting so much so that it became the norm? And most importantly, why? Unfortunately, because neither of you have built me a time machine for me to go back in time to check for the exact reasons why, I had to resort to archaeological findings instead. And unfortunately, once again, it tells us that we are still unsure of the real reasons. But there is a high possibility that 12,000 years ago, when humans dwelled in settlements and farming became the norm, we had problems with crops. Crops either failed or we had unfriendly animals, let's just put it that way. Whatever the reasons, humans back then had to find alternative ways to feed their population. And some realized that killing their neighboring settlements would solve all their problems. At least 27 of them were found dead in just one settlement, according to the reports.
So all these arguments that war is part of human evolution or it's in our DNA, we have no evidence for that.
And because it was a success story, otherwise why would we still be stabbing and shooting each other 12,000 years later? The norm continued with growing population, growing societal complexities, growing hunger for power, with the two most important fuels that made it all happen: patriotism and nationalism.
It's a human invention, it's not a natural phenomenon, which then spread. Because even if you have a region with 50 tribes who are peaceful, and one tribe which is warlike, that's enough. The war will spread.
The true form of military, as one would define today, was first seen in Mesopotamia or Egypt. That's in 3000 BC. Why did they decide to have a formal military? Because Mesopotamia lied between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, while the ancient Egypt had River Nile. River-view civilizations were all the rage back then, and everyone wanted to have a piece of it, which is why these empires had to have formal militaries in place to defend themselves. Although it is very difficult to account for how many soldiers died fighting for these empires, ancient Egypt back then had about 50,000 soldiers in its military in 2600 BC. Even if I account for half of those soldiers' deaths, that is still 25,000 deaths. That's a large number for a tiny population of that era. The next most prominent army was that of the Caliphate, or the Caliphate, after they invaded and captured the Persian army. It was founded immediately after the death of Prophet Muhammad and founded by Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman and Ali. The Caliphate lasted until 1924, just like yesterday in comparison to when it was started, in the 7th century BC. Imagine the number of people that died and got sexually harassed, especially for refusing to convert their religion, because the Caliphate was recorded to have tolerated other religions only during the initial years of their movement. All this chaos only to say, my way or the highway. Fast forward to the 19th century when we saw the Napoleonic Wars after the French Revolution, built on great ideals such as liberty and equality, but once again overcome by the greed of power. And not to forget the fear of the British of losing their monarchs, as they still do. 3.5 million people died. To forget another biggest war that was fought because religion, the Crimean War. Russia wanted control over the holy places. The Ottomans, also known as the Uthmans, said nope, and just like that, 600,000 people died. And oh, the American Civil War. 600,000 people died once again because some people believe that they're better than the others solely because they have a certain skin color and therefore deserve the right to whip the others. We haven't reached the First World War yet, and I've already given you an estimation of more than 10 million people dead because of ego. Those that wage these wars dine a fine 3-course meal in their 24/7 protected buildings, may it be a castle or a corporate building. But those that suffer are those that are fed this propaganda and accused of being anti-national for speaking against the war idea.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
They are forced into participating in this nonsense even if They belong to a colonized country that has nothing to do with the war, see themselves forced into a military tactic that leaves them mentally scarred for life. Some are gassed to death in masses, shot to death in masses, or even burnt alive in masses. In Rwanda, it happened in churches. But do you really suppose it was all behind us in the past now because nobody really wants a war? Because you saw a bunch of corporations and nations withdraw their consignments and agreements from Russia as soon as the Ukrainian-Russia war was declared. Because you truly believe that there's only to lose and nothing to gain from all this. Well, gear up to finally realize how the world around you operates when you TikTok away during the day. Remember the Iraq War? The war that lasted for 8 years? The one that was built on nothing but impulsive and irrational decision making, and not to forget, false allegations? The war that was actually an act of terrorism, and the real terrorists got to walk away with it, and to this day get to be respected and walk freely amongst others.
On the evening of 9/11, the president's saying, well, maybe we'll be going after Iraq now. And somebody said, well, that would be against international law. The president responded, I don't care, we're going to kick some ass.
Who were the ones who really suffered?
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat.
And so did you and I, not just the families of these brave men. How? Let me explain. Wars are a money-making phenomena, and corporations thrive from it. And I'm not just talking about corporations of oil and defense industries that profiteer off of wars by supplying their products. I'm talking about corporations that supply you and me with food during these war times. PhD from Harvard University, Dr. Rupert Russell, in his book Price Wars, How Commodities Markets Made Our Chaotic World, said, war is often used as an excuse to increase prices exorbitantly. This is a common practice among commodity traders who often use war as a pretext to raise prices even when there is no real shortage of supply. He pointed out how during the Iraq War in 2003 and the Arab Spring in 2011, there weren't any shortages of food supply, but the prices were increased exorbitantly. This happened because commodity traders engaged in speculation and bet that war would drive up the prices. Therefore, bought up food commodities in mere anticipation. This insanity is not limited to food alone. It applies to fuel, construction, and even medical supplies. It happened to Tamiflu during the Iraq War when the prices were increased by 100%, and IV bags when its prices were increased by 400% during the Syrian civil war, all the while when there weren't any shortages. Why don't governments regulate these prices or do something about it in other ways? Well, first of all, if you are a capitalist and talk about government regulations, you are hilarious. And secondly, if you think governments have higher authority over large corporations, you're even more hilarious. When governments actually try and side with the people of their country by regulating things, corporations step in and lobby against it. You probably knew this already, but there is something that most of us do not know. Corporations can not only go against governments but can also sue them for billions of dollars and almost always win the case, especially if the deal is international. Let me introduce you to ISDS systems, Investor State Dispute Settlements. It is a system that allows foreign investors to sue governments for alleged breaches in investment treaties. ISDS provisions are found in free trade agreements that are formed between countries or even bilateral trade agreements. Under ISDS, investors can bring claims against governments directly into the International Tribunal instead of going to the domestic courts of the host countries that may or may not be as quick to do their jobs. Now look, ISDS is controversial. It gives way too much power to the investors and undermines the national sovereignty. What's worse is the dispute proceedings are often confidential. You cannot go look for these proceedings online to find the transcripts. What's even worse is that the arbitrators selected for these proceedings are often done so in secrecy. Complete lack of transparency. Here's a well-known case from ISDS that favored the corporation over the government of a country. Bywater Goff Limited is a British water company that sued the government of Tanzania for not providing adequate water supply as agreed on the contract. Tanzania is a poor country. The city of Dar es Salaam, where the operations were to take place, did not have enough water for everyone. It's a drought-stricken country. There is no proper water infrastructure. It's an African country, for heaven's sake, what did you expect? But guess what? ISTS ruled in favor of Bywater Gulf Limited and asked the government of Tanzania to pay $13 million in compensation. If you think that's bad, listen to this one. Desert Line Projects LLC is a US-based company that sued the government of Yemen for not providing adequate security when a war broke out in the country. ISDS asked the government of Yemen to compensate the corporation with $100 million. Not even the poorest war-torn countries are spared. What will your cozy first world problems do any better against these corporations? Your first world country problems exist because of these corporations and their thirst for money making. For years together, you've been misled to believe that capitalism is a messiah of mankind. But it has been used to favor a small group of people time and again, while the rest of us dwell in hope for the entirety of our lives. Those who say that they've managed to escape this rat race are even more hilarious to me, because they fail to realize that their lives and work are still controlled by large corporations. You cannot do this because it is against our policies. You cannot do that because it is against the government policies. Ever got to hear that before? While a tiny group of few can not only do whatever they wish and get away with it, but also alter these policies to favor themselves. We now live in the age of neocolonialism, no longer ruled by the monarchs but by a wealthy few. Perhaps even autocracy but with a different name. Is there nothing that we can do? Well, for as long as you spend your 24 hours watching random people dance on your phone screens instead of educating yourself and making yourself aware of your surroundings, nothing can be done. Consider this. Take your first better step and subscribe to this channel. And share this video if you know someone who cares.
America, in their humanitarian approach to the world, you know, we're over there to help the Iraqi people, not harm. I just can't imagine a better cabinet to be taking care of our people and our country and the rest of the world, because we're rich, we're powerful, we have opportunities and technology, and we don't just keep it within our country. We share it. We want to help other people. I think it's a pretty remarkable. I'm very proud to be a part of this country.
Of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine.